The dust had barely settled from the stagecoach wheels when Clara Whitmore stepped onto the parched earth of Mercy's Bend. Her traveling dress, once pristine blue silk from Boston, now bore the rust-colored film of a 3-day journey through territories that seemed to grow more desolate with each passing mile. She pressed a lace handkerchief to her nose, fighting the urge to cough as the dry wind whipped red dirt into miniature cyclones around her feet. "Miss Whitmore, I presume?" A deep voice cut through the afternoon heat. She turned to find Roy Lanton himself, resplendent in a black suit that seemed untouched by the desert's harsh embrace. His smile was practiced, calculated, the smile of a man who counted every gesture as an investment. "Mr. Lanton," she offered her gloved hand, which he took with proprietary confidence, holding it a moment too long. "Welcome to your new home," he said, gesturing toward the ramshackle collection of wooden buildings that comprised the town. "I trust your journey wasn't too arduous?" Clara forced a smile. "It was educational." Roy's laugh had no warmth in it. "The frontier takes some adjustment for Eastern sensibilities, but you'll find I've made provisions for your comfort. The finest house in town." Naturally. As he led her to his carriage, Clara caught the stares of townspeople, women in faded calico who whispered behind their hands, men who tipped their hats to Roy while their eyes remained cold. She was a curiosity, she realized, the Eastern bride bought to legitimize a frontier banker's ambitions. The next morning, Roy arrived at her temporary lodgings with an agenda as rigid as his starched collar. "I've arranged for you to visit the Morrison Ranch today," he announced over breakfast. "You'll need to learn to ride properly before the wedding. Can't have my wife afraid of horses." "I've ridden before," Clara said quietly. "Side saddle in Central Park hardly counts. My dear." His tone held a patronizing edge that made her jaw tighten. "Out here, you'll need real skills." The Morrison Ranch sprawled across the valley like a dusty jewel, its split-rail fences marking boundaries between civilization and wildness. Clara had expected another display of Roy's influence, but the ranch house was modest, weathered by wind and sun into a comfortable plainness. "You must be Miss Whitmore." Sarah Morrison, a woman whose face bore the lines of honest work, greeted her warmly. "Roy sent word you'd be needing lessons." "I'm grateful for your time, Mrs. Morrison." "Sarah, please. And it's no trouble. Jace handles most of the horse training anyway. He's got a gift with him." She called toward the stables. "Jace, the lady from back east is here." Clara expected another of Roy's associates, polished, deferential, eager to please the banker who held their loans. Instead, a man emerged from the stable shadows who seemed carved from the landscape itself. Dust clung to his worn leather chaps, and his hat sat low over eyes that held depth she couldn't fathom. He moved with an economy of motion, each step deliberate and sure. "Ma'am." He touched his hat brim, the gesture brief but respectful. "This is Jace Colburn," Sarah said, "best horseman in 3 counties, though he'd never say so himself." Jace's gaze met Clara's for a moment before sliding away. There was something in that look, not the hungry assessment she'd grown accustomed to from Roy's business partners, nor the veiled contempt of the townswomen. It was simply acknowledgement, as if he saw her, truly saw her, and required nothing more. "Have you selected a mount for Miss Whitmore?" Sarah asked. "The bay mare," Jace replied, his voice low and measured. "She's steady but spirited, good for someone relearning." Clara bristled slightly. "I assure you, I'm quite capable. Eastern riding and Western riding are different things. Ma'am?" His tone held no condescension, just quiet fact. "The mare will teach you what you need to know, if you let her." As he led the horse from the stable, Clara found herself studying him despite herself. His movement spoke of strength held in check, of a man comfortable in his own skin, yet somehow separate from the world around him. When he helped her mount, his hands were gentle but impersonal, steadying her only as long as necessary before stepping back. "Keep your weight centered," he instructed, adjusting her posture with brief touches. "The horse needs to trust you won't throw her off balance." Like a partnership, Clara said, surprising herself. Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps. Exactly like that. For the next hour, he led her through the basics. Patient, but uncompromising. When she grew frustrated with his corrections, he simply waited until she was ready to continue. When she succeeded in maintaining the proper seat through a canter, he offered a slight nod that somehow meant more than Roy's elaborate compliments. "You're a quick study," he said as they walked the horses back to cool them down. "You're a good teacher." She paused, then added, "Though I suspect you don't often work with beginners. Everyone begins somewhere." He glanced at her sideways. "Even bankers' brides." The words should have stung, but his tone held no judgment. If anything, there was a thread of understanding that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. "Yes," she said quietly. "Even them." As the afternoon wore on, dark clouds began massing on the horizon. Jace watched them with the wariness of someone who'd learned to read nature's moods. "Storm coming," he said. "We should head back." But the storm moved faster than expected. They were still a mile from the ranch house when the wind picked up, driving sand and grit before it in stinging waves. Clara's mare danced nervously as lightning split the sky. "This way!" Jace had to shout over the rising wind. He led them toward a line of rocks where an old line shack huddled against the hillside. They barely made it inside before the full force of the sandstorm hit. The shack was sparse but solid. A single room with a cold fireplace, a rough table, and a narrow cot. Dust filtered through the cracks between boards, but it was shelter. Jace secured the horses in the lean-to attached to the shack, then returned to find Clara trying to shake the dust from her riding skirt. "It gets everywhere," she said, half laughing at the futility of it. "Part of the land." He pulled off his hat, revealing dark hair that spoke of mixed heritage. In the dim light filtering through the single window, she could see his features more clearly, the strong planes of his face, the watchful intelligence in his dark eyes. "You're not from here originally," she said, then immediately regretted the presumption. No one's from here originally. He moved to the fireplace, checking the chimney before beginning to lay a fire. "The land was here first. We're all just passing through." "That's not what Roy says. He talks about building an empire, leaving a legacy." Jace's hand stilled for a moment. "Men like Roy Lanton take what they want and call it destiny. Don't mean the land agrees." Clara found herself moving closer to where he knelt by the hearth. "And you? What do you want?" He looked up at her then, and for an instant, his careful guard dropped. She saw something raw there, a loneliness that echoed her own. "Just to live honest," he said finally. "Work, that means something. Sky overhead and ground underfoot." He turned back to the fire. "Simple things. Simple," Clara repeated, thinking of the complex web of debts and obligations that had brought her here. "That sounds peaceful." "You say that like peace is foreign to you." She laughed, but it came out brittle. "Where I come from, peace is a luxury few can afford. Even fewer when your family's reputation hangs by a thread, and marriage is the only currency left to trade." The words spilled out before she could stop them. Jace said nothing, just continued building the fire until flames began to lick at the kindling. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. "Must be hard, leaving everything behind for a place like this." "The place isn't the hard part." Clara moved to the window, watching the storm rage outside. "It's pretending to be something I'm not. Roy wants a decoration, a symbol of his success. Eastern refinement to prove he's more than just another frontier opportunist. And what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them. Clara turned from the window to find Jace standing now, watching her with that steady gaze that seemed to see too much. "I want—" She stopped, realizing she'd never really asked herself that question. Every choice had been made for her, by circumstances or by others. "I suppose I want what you have. To live honest, as you put it. Nothing stopping you. Except my mother's debts, my younger sister's futures, the promise I made to save them by any means necessary." She shook her head. "You wouldn't understand. Wouldn't I? There was something sharp in his voice now. You think you're the only one who's had to choose between what's right and what's necessary. Their eyes met across the small space, and Clara felt something shift. This wasn't the polite distance of strangers anymore. Somehow, in this crude shelter with the storm raging outside, pretense had fallen away. I'm sorry, she said. That was presumptuous of me. No need for apologies. He turned to check on the horses through the connecting door. Storm settling. We can head back soon. But Clara found she didn't want to leave this strange bubble of honesty. Out there waited Roy with his calculating smiles and proprietary touches. Out there waited a life mapped out in someone else's hand. Thank you, she said quietly, for the lesson and for listening. Jace paused in the doorway, his profile etched against the fading light. Sometimes a body needs to speak their truth, even if nothing comes of it. And sometimes, Clara said, surprising herself again with her boldness, someone needs to hear it. He turned then, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other. No words were necessary. In that look was recognition, two souls marked by compromise and duty, finding unexpected understanding in an unlikely place. The storm was passing, leaving the air clean and sharp. Soon they would have to return to their respective roles, she the Eastern bride, he the hired hand. But for now, in this moment between worlds, they were simply Clara and Jace. Two people who had accidentally shown each other their true faces. As they rode back to the ranch house in the gathering dusk, Clara felt something had fundamentally changed. The weight of her obligation to Roy hadn't lessened, but alongside it was something new, a dangerous awareness that another kind of life existed, one where honesty mattered more than appearances. She didn't know yet what that awareness would cost her, but as she watched Jace's broad shoulders ahead of her on the trail, steady and sure in the saddle, she suspected the price would be higher than she could imagine. The morning after the storm, Clara woke to find a message from Roy waiting at her lodgings. Business at the new bank site would keep him occupied for several days. Would she mind terribly continuing her riding lessons at the Morrison Ranch? His tone suggested it wasn't really a question. Clara found herself relieved rather than disappointed. The ranch had become a refuge from the stifling expectations of town, where every gesture was scrutinized and weighed against her future position as Mrs. Roy Lanton. Sarah Morrison greeted her warmly when she arrived. That was quite a storm yesterday. Jay said you handled it well. He was very capable, Clara said, aware of the inadequacy of the word. Sarah's knowing smile suggested she heard what went unsaid. Jace has that effect, steady as bedrock. That one, though Lord knows life hasn't given him much cause to be. Over the following days, Clara found herself folding into the rhythm of ranch life. She helped Sarah with the kitchen garden, learning which plants thrived in the unforgiving soil. She watched the hands work cattle, marveling at their easy coordination. And always, there was Jace, teaching her not just riding but the language of the land itself. See how the grass bends there? He pointed across the meadow during one of their rides. Water runs underground in the wet season. Good place to dig a well. How can you tell? My mother taught me. The words came carefully, as if he was testing their weight. She knew every plant, every sign, said the land speaks if you know how to listen. Clara sensed the significance of this revelation. She must have been remarkable. She was Apache. He said it simply, but she heard the challenge in it. My father was cavalry. Neither side wanted what came of it. The confession hung between them, weighted with unspoken history. Clara thought of the whispers she'd heard in town, the way certain folks moved aside when Jace passed. Half-breed. They called him when they thought no one was listening, as if a man could be measured in fractions. That must have been difficult, she said finally, growing up between worlds. No more difficult than growing up poor in a rich man's world, I expect. He glanced at her. You hide it well, but it's there, the way you hold yourself, like you're always ready to prove you belong. Clara's breath caught. No one had ever seen through her careful facade so easily. My father was a clerk who dreamed too big. When his investments failed, she shrugged, the gesture encompassing years of genteel poverty. Mother never forgave him for dying and leaving us with the consequences. And now you're here, paying his debts with yourself. The blunt truth of it made her flinch. When you say it like that, it sounds so transactional, isn't it? They'd stopped their horses at a creek bed, dismounting to let them drink. Clara found herself standing closer to Jace than propriety dictated, drawn by the honest comfort of his presence. Yes, she admitted. Roy was quite clear about the terms. My respectability and Eastern connections for his financial support of my family. A business arrangement dressed in wedding clothes. Jace skipped a stone across a shallow pool, the rhythmic plop, plop, plop filling the silence. You could run. Where? With what? My sisters would find their own way. People do, when they have to. Clara shook her head. You don't understand. They're so young. And Mother is... She stopped, unable to voice her mother's creeping laudanum dependence, another secret shame to bear. I understand obligation. Jace's voice was quiet. I send half my wages to my mother's people on the reservation. It's not enough, never enough, but it's what I can do. They stood side by side, watching the water flow over ancient stones. Clara became aware of details she shouldn't notice. The way sunlight caught in his dark hair, the careful strength in his hands, the heat that seemed to radiate from him in the cool morning air. I should hate this place, she said suddenly. Everything about it is harsh and unforgiving. But somehow, it's honest. Jace finished. The land doesn't lie or pretend. It just is. Yes. She turned to find him watching her, and the look in his eyes made her chest tight. Jace, we should keep moving, he said, but his voice was rough. Storm washed out some of the trails. Need to check the northern pasture. The moment dissolved, but its echo remained. As they rode, Clara found herself studying the landscape with new eyes, trying to see what Jace saw, the fierce beauty of it, the stubborn life that flourished despite all odds, prairie roses blooming in rocky soil, hawks circling on thermals she was learning to read. They were checking fence lines when they encountered the rattlesnake. Clara's mare sensed it first, shying violently. Clara kept her seat. Jace's training had become instinct. But the snake, disturbed from its sunny rock, coiled to strike. Jace's response was lightning quick. His revolver cleared leather and fired in one smooth motion. The snake's head disappeared in a puff of dust and scales. You're bleeding, Clara gasped, seeing red seep through his shirt sleeve. Mare's hoof caught me when she spooked. He holstered the gun calmly, as if saving her life was routine. It's nothing. It's not nothing. Without thinking, Clara was off her horse and at his side. Let me see. Miss Whitmore. Clara, she said firmly. After everything, I think you can call me Clara. His eyes met hers, dark and fathomless. Clara, then... She helped him from his horse, her hands surprisingly steady as she rolled up his sleeve to reveal a nasty gash, using water from her canteen and her spare petticoat for bandages. Propriety be damned. She cleaned and wrapped the wound with careful efficiency. Where did an Eastern lady learn field medicine? Jace asked, his voice strained with something that might have been pain or something else entirely. We couldn't always afford doctors, Clara said simply. I learned to make do. Her fingers lingered on his arm longer than necessary, feeling the warmth of his skin, the solid strength beneath. When she looked up, his face was very close enough to see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Clara! Her name was a whisper, a question, a warning all at once. She should have stepped back, should have remembered Roy, her obligations, the impossibility of this moment. Instead, she swayed closer, drawn by something stronger than sense. The sound of approaching horses shattered the spell. Clara sprang back as 3 riders crested the hill, ranch hands looking for strays. If they noticed the charged atmosphere, they were wise enough not to comment. That night, Clara lay wakeful in her narrow bed, reliving each word, each look, each accidental touch. She was playing with fire, she knew, but after years of cold duty, the warmth was impossible to resist. The next day brought a new lesson. Jace taught her to read weather in cloud formations, to find direction by stars, to know when a horse was sick before symptoms showed. He taught her practical things, survival things, as if preparing her for a life beyond Roy's gilded cage. "Why are you showing me all this?" she asked as they watched the sunset paint the mountains crimson. "Everyone should know how to take care of themselves," he said, "especially those who've been told they can't." It was Sarah who provided the next piece of Jace's story, over tea while the men worked. She spoke of how he'd come to the ranch 5 years ago, half dead from a beating in town. They didn't take kindly to him defending that Apache family, Sarah said. But Jace never could stand by when someone was being wronged. My Robert found him by the road, brought him home. He's been here ever since. And the town tolerates him, mostly. He keeps his head down, works hard. But men like Roy Lanton, Sarah's lips pressed thin, they see him as less than human, useful when needed, disposable when not. Clara's stomach churned at the thought of Roy's casual bigotry, the way he spoke of the lesser races as if they were livestock. How had she not seen it clearly before? That evening, as Clara prepared to return to town, she found Jace mending tack in the barn. The lantern light threw shadows that emphasized the planes of his face, the careful control he maintained always. "I know what you're thinking," he said without looking up. "That this, whatever this is, it's impossible." "Is it?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Now he did look at her, and the raw longing in his eyes took her breath. "You know it is." "I'm nobody. Nothing. A half-breed ranch hand who'll never own more than the clothes on his back. You're trapped," Clara finished. "Bought and paid for like a prize heifer. That's not, isn't it?" She moved closer, anger and desperation making her bold. "At least you chose your cage. Mine was built around me before I was old enough to see the bars." They stood facing each other in the golden lamplight, all pretense stripped away. The space between them hummed with possibility and impossibility, in equal measure. "What do you want from me, Clara?" His voice was rough, almost broken. "You know I can't save you, can't offer you anything but truth," she said. "You offer me truth. Do you know how precious that is? How long it's been since anyone looked at me and saw something other than a commodity?" "Is that all?" The question held depth she wasn't ready to explore. "No," she whispered. "But it has to be enough." Jace closed his eyes, his hands clenched at his sides. When he opened them again, his control was back in place, but she'd seen beneath it now. Seen the man who wanted what he couldn't have, who'd learned to live with impossible desires. "The day after tomorrow," he said carefully. "There's a canyon I want to show you, sacred to my mother's people. If you want to see it." Clara knew she should refuse, knew that every moment spent with him was another step toward a precipice she couldn't see the bottom of. But she was so tired of being careful, of measuring every choice against someone else's expectations. "Yes," she said simply, "I want to see it." As she rode back to town under a vault of stars, Clara felt as if she were split in two. Part of her sat primly in Roy's parlor, discussing wedding preparations and guest lists. But the other part, the truest part, remained at the ranch with a man who saw her clearly and wanted her anyway. She didn't yet know the price of that wanting. But as the lights of Mercy's Bend came into view, tawdry and false after the clean darkness of the range, she suspected she would pay it regardless. Roy Lanton's carriage arrived at the Morrison Ranch unannounced, its polished black sides an affront to the dusty simplicity of the place. Clara watched from the porch as he descended, his expression arranged in what passed for pleasure but looked more like satisfaction, a man come to collect his property. "My dear," he said, barely glancing at her sun-darkened skin and the simple cotton dress Sarah had lent her. "I believe you've had quite enough of playing frontier woman. Time to return to civilization." Clara felt Sarah's supportive hand on her shoulder, but her eyes searched for Jace. She found him by the corral. his face carved from stone as he watched Roy's proprietary hand settle on her elbow. "I've arranged a fitting with the seamstress," Roy continued, guiding her toward the carriage. The wedding dress arrived from San Francisco. And really, Clara, you must be more careful about sun exposure. You're beginning to look quite common. The word hung in the air like a slap. Clara saw Jace's jaw tighten, saw his hand move reflexively toward his hip before stilling. Their eyes met across the yard, and in that glance was everything they couldn't say. "Be careful. I'll wait. Don't forget." Then she was in the carriage, Roy's cologne overwhelming after days of clean wind and sage. He talked the entire journey back to town about the bank's progress, the important men who would attend their wedding, the house he was having built to proper Eastern standards. Clara made appropriate sounds, but her mind remained at the ranch, wondering if she'd ever see that sacred canyon Jace had mentioned. The next days passed in a suffocating whirl of preparations. Roy paraded her through town like a prize mare, introducing her to business associates who eyed her with the same calculating appreciation they might show for a profitable investment. The wedding dress was a monument to excess, yards of imported silk and lace that would be ruined in minutes by desert dust. "You seem distracted," Roy observed over dinner at his home, a garish display of wealth that felt like a mausoleum. "Are you quite well?" "Perfectly," Clara lied, pushing food around her plate. "Perhaps just tired from the journey." "Ah, yes, your little adventure at the Morrison place." His tone sharpened. "I trust you found the experience educational, though I dare say you won't have much need for horseback riding once we're married. A lady of your standing shouldn't associate too closely with the help." "The Morrisons were very kind." "The Morrisons are useful," Roy corrected. "There's a difference. As for that half-breed they employ." He shook his head. "I've been meaning to speak to Robert about that. It doesn't reflect well on the community, harboring such undesirable elements." Clara's hands clenched in her lap. "Mr. Colburn seemed perfectly respectable to me." Roy's laugh was ugly. "Respectable? My dear, naive Clara. Men like that, mixed blood. No prospects, no place in decent society. They're little better than animals. Useful for certain types of labor, but hardly respectable." "That's a terrible thing to say." His eyes narrowed. "Is it? I'm simply stating facts. Surely your Eastern education taught you about the natural order of things. Some are born to lead, others to serve. It's kindness, really, to keep everyone in their proper place." Clara felt sick. How had she not seen this viciousness before? Or had she simply chosen not to look? Too desperate for the security he offered to examine the man himself. "Now then," Roy continued, pulling a document from his jacket. "There's the small matter of our marriage contract. Standard provisions, you understand. Control of property, expectations of behavior, consequences for indiscretions." Clara read the dense legal language with growing horror. It was worse than she'd imagined. Total control of her person, her property, even her correspondence. Clauses about producing heirs, maintaining his household, representing his interests. And buried in the middle, penalties for actions that bring dishonor to the union. Vague enough to mean anything Roy decided. "This is quite comprehensive," she managed. "I'm a thorough man." He produced a pen. "Your signature, my dear, just a formality." Clara stared at the contract, seeing her future spelled out in cold legal terms. No freedom, no choices, no life beyond what Roy permitted. The pen felt like lead in her hand. "I'd like to read it more carefully," she said. "Perhaps take it with me." "Nonsense." His hand covered hers, pressing the pen toward paper. "A woman shouldn't trouble herself with legal matters. Trust me to know what's best." "I said no." The words came out sharper than intended. Roy's genial mask slipped, revealing something cold beneath. "I beg your pardon. I need time to consider. Surely that's not unreasonable." They stared at each other across the dining table, and Clara saw clearly for the first time what her life would be. This man who would own her, control her, diminish her until nothing remained but a pretty shell to display its social functions. "Very well," Roy said finally. his tone arctic. "You have until tomorrow evening. But Clara, don't mistake my patience for weakness. This marriage will happen. Your family's debts ensure that. The only question is whether you enter it willingly or otherwise." The threat hung between them, unsubtle and absolute. Clara rose on unsteady legs. "I'd like to return to my lodgings now." "Of course, but perhaps a reminder of what's at stake." He produced a telegram. "From your mother. It seems your youngest sister has taken ill. Medical expenses, as you know, can be quite substantial. How fortunate you'll soon have a generous husband to assist with such matters." Clara took the telegram with numb fingers. Little Mary, barely 12, suffering while their mother scraped for pennies. The trap was perfect, inescapable. Roy's smile returned, triumphant. "Until tomorrow, my dear." That night, Clara sat at her window watching the stars wheel overhead. The same stars that looked down on the ranch, on Jace, on a life she'd glimpsed but couldn't grasp. She thought of his steady hands, his quiet strength, the way he'd offered her truth when everyone else dealt in lies. The contract lay on her desk like a shackle waiting to be locked. Tomorrow she would sign it, would sell herself to save her sisters. There was no other choice. But tonight she was still free. Before she could lose her nerve, Clara changed into her riding clothes, practical garments that felt more like herself than any silk gown. She slipped from her lodgings like a shadow, made her way to the livery stable where she'd kept the mare Sarah had lent her. The night road stretched before her, silver in the moonlight. It was madness to ride alone, dangerous in a dozen ways. But the alternative was to sit in that airless room and feel her soul die by degrees. The ranch was dark when she arrived, only a faint glow from the bunkhouse where the hands would be playing cards. Clara tied her mare and moved on foot, drawn by instinct to the barn where she'd last spoken with Jace. She found him there, as if he'd been waiting. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim interior, and she saw his shoulders tense then relax as he recognized her. "You shouldn't be here. I know." She moved closer, close enough to see his face in the moonlight. "Roy came today. Took me back to town. There's a contract." Clara, just her name, waited with understanding and sorrow. "I have to sign it tomorrow. My sister is sick, and Roy made it clear that without his money—" She stopped, unable to voice the trap's full dimensions. "But I couldn't. I had to say goodbye." His voice was rough. "No." The word surprised them both. "Not goodbye. Not yet. You said there was a canyon, sacred to your mother's people. I want to see it, tonight, before I become someone else's property. Clara, if anyone saw, then my reputation would be ruined and Roy wouldn't want me." The recklessness of it made her laugh, sharp and brittle. Would that be so terrible? He moved then, swift as thought, his hands gripping her shoulders. "You don't know what you're saying. A ruined woman in a place like this, you'd have nothing, no protection, no future. I have no future now." The words tore from her throat. "Just an existence, measured out in tea parties and suffocating dinners, and pretending not to notice when my husband speaks of other human beings like cattle." She was crying now. Months of suppressed fear and anger finally breaking free. Jace pulled her against him, and she buried her face in his shirt, breathing in leather and soap and something indefinably him. "Shh," he murmured into her hair. "Easy now, easy." They stood that way for long moments, her tears soaking his shirt, his hands gentle on her back. When she finally pulled away, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "The canyon," she said. "Please, give me one night of truth before a lifetime of lies." He searched her face, reading something there that made him nod slowly. "Get your horse." They rode in silence through the sleeping land, following trails visible only to Jace's experienced eyes. The canyon, when they reached it, was a revelation. Walls of striated rock rising to frame a corridor of stars, ancient petroglyphs barely visible in the moonlight. "My mother brought me here when I was young," Jace said softly. "Said this was where the Earth spirit was strongest. where you could speak your truth and the stones would remember. Clara dismounted, drawn to the canyon walls. Her fingers traced the carved symbols, feeling the weight of ages. What did you tell the stones? That I wanted to belong somewhere, to be more than what others saw when they looked at me. He joined her at the wall, still waiting for an answer. She turned to him then, her decision made. I know what my truth is. Clara, I love you. The words fell into the sacred silence like stones into still water. I've loved you since that first storm. Maybe before. I love your honesty and your strength and the way you see the world. He kissed her then, swallowing her words, and the world narrowed to this. His lips on hers, gentle, then urgent, asking questions she answered with her whole being. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. You can't love me, he said raggedly. I've got nothing to give you, no way to save you. I don't need saving. Her hands framed his face. I need this. I need you. Even if it's just for tonight. I need something real to hold on to when everything else is false. He closed his eyes, war playing across his features. When he opened them, she saw capitulation and despair in equal measure. You'll be the death of me. Clara Whitmore. No, she whispered. I'll be the life of you, just as you're the life of me. Under the ancient stones and eternal stars, they came together with desperate tenderness. Each touch was precious because it was forbidden. Each moment stolen from a future that didn't belong to them. The canyon held their secrets, their promises, their grief for what could never be. When dawn touched the rim of the canyon, they lay entwined on their spread coats, trying to pretend the night would last forever. But the light was relentless, painting truth across the landscape. You have to go back, Jace said, his voice hollow. Sign his papers. Live the life that keeps your family safe. And you? I'll leave, find work elsewhere. Easier for both of us if I'm gone. No. Clara sat up, fierce despite her dishevelment. Don't you dare disappear on me. I'll know you're out there somewhere, under these same stars. That will have to be enough. He pulled her back down, holding her like she might evaporate with the morning mist. It won't be enough, not nearly enough, but it's what we have. They dressed in silence, each movement bringing them closer to separation. At the canyon's mouth, Jace caught her hand. That first day, when you came to the ranch, I knew you were trouble. Too fine, too beautiful, too far above my reach. I should have run then. I'm glad you didn't. So am I. He lifted her hand to his lips. And I'm sorry too. Sorry I can't be the man who saves you from this. Clara touched his face one last time, memorizing the feel of stubble against her palm. You already have. You saved the part of me that matters most. The rest. She shrugged, trying for lightness. The rest is just time to serve. They rode back as the sun climbed, maintaining careful distance now that the world was watching. At the ranch, Clara dismounted, knowing this was the last time. Goodbye, Jace Colburn, she said formally. Goodbye, Miss Whitmore, he replied, but their eyes said everything else. I love you. I'll remember. I'm sorry. If only. Then Clara turned her horse toward town, toward duty and contracts and a life that would never again taste of truth. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen him standing in the dust, watching until she disappeared, his fists clenched against the urge to follow. The sun was high when Clara walked into Roy's office, the contract still waiting on his desk. Ah, my dear, ready to be sensible? Yes, Clara said, her voice steady despite the ashes in her chest. I'm ready. She signed her name with a hand that didn't shake, sealing her fate with ink and resignation. But inside, where Roy couldn't reach, she carried the memory of a sacred canyon and a love that had burned brief and bright as a falling star. It would have to be enough. The desert night wrapped around them like a blanket woven from starlight and sage. They had ridden in silence from the canyon to a sheltered grove of cottonwoods by a stream, a place Jace knew where they could rest the horses and pretend. For these last precious hours, that dawn would never come. Clara spread her riding coat on the sandy ground while Jace tended the horses. The mundane actions felt sacred somehow, weighted with the knowledge that after tonight, such simple freedoms would be lost to her forever. When he returned, she was sitting with her knees drawn up, watching the water catch moonlight as it burbled over stones. "Second thoughts?" he asked, settling beside her with careful distance between them. "No." She turned to look at him, memorizing the way shadows played across his face. "No thoughts at all. I'm tired of thinking. Jace, tired of measuring every action against consequences. Just for tonight. I want to feel." "Clara," his voice held warning and longing in equal measure. "Do you remember what you told me that first day? About partnerships, about trust?" She moved closer, closing the space he'd left. "I trust you, with my life, with my heart, with whatever honor I have left to lose." "Your honor isn't lost." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Nothing we feel for each other could be dishonorable." Roy would disagree. Society would disagree. Then they're fools. The vehemence in his voice surprised them both. "What's honorable about selling yourself to a man who sees you as property? What's noble about a world that values your marriage contract over your soul?" Clara laughed, soft and bitter. "When you put it like that, perhaps I'm the fallen woman already. What's one more step into disgrace?" He turned her face toward his, thumb gentle against her cheek. "You're not fallen. You're the finest person I've ever known. Brave and true and so beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes. Then look at me now," she whispered. "See me as I really am. Not the Eastern lady or the banker's bride, just Clara. I've never seen you as anything else." The kiss was different from the one in the canyon, slower, deeper, with a desperate edge tempered by tenderness. Clara felt herself falling into it, into him, letting go of everything but this moment, when they broke apart. She was trembling. "I've never—" She stopped, suddenly shy despite everything. "I know." His forehead rested against hers. "Neither have I. Not like this, not with someone who mattered." The admission broke something open in her chest. "We matter. You matter." His hands framed her face. "You matter more than my next breath. That's why this is killing me. Clara, because after tonight—" She silenced him with her lips, pouring all her love and grief and desperate need into the kiss. "No, not yet. Please, Jace, give me this to remember when everything else is cold." He made a sound like a man drowning and pulled her against him. The coat beneath them was rough, the ground hard, but Clara noticed none of it. There was only Jace's hands, reverent and sure, teaching her a language she'd never known existed. Only his voice murmuring her name like a prayer, like a promise, like goodbye. They moved together with the ancient rhythm of the stream, the sighing wind, the turning stars. Each touch was a vow, each breath a sacrament. Clara understood now why they called it giving yourself to someone. She gave Jace everything, held nothing back, and received the same in return, when passion crested and ebbed, leaving them entwined and breathless. Clara felt remade. The woman who would walk back into Roy's world tomorrow would carry this night within her like a secret flame, proof that she had lived, truly lived, if only for these stolen hours. "Are you all right?" Jace's voice was rough with concern and something deeper. "More than all right." She pressed closer, unwilling to let reality intrude. "I didn't know it could be like that. So, complete." His arms tightened around her. "Neither did I." They lay in silence, watching stars wheel overhead. Clara tried to name constellations, to fix this moment in memory with precise detail, the scent of sage and water, the distant call of an owl, the way Jace's heartbeat felt beneath her palm. "Tell me about your mother," she said eventually. "Tell me about belonging to two worlds." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. He told her about growing up on the edge of everything, too white for the reservation, too Indian for the town, about his mother's strength and sadness, his father's absence, the grandmother who taught him the old stories even as the new world tried to erase them. She used to say I was born under a wandering star, he said, destined to search for home but never find it. Maybe home isn't a place. Clara traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady thrum of life beneath her fingers. Maybe it's a person. If that's true, then I'm about to lose my home just as I found it. The pain in his voice made her eyes burn. You're not losing me. I'll be changed, caged, but I'll still be me, and I'll still love you. Love. He tested the word like a foreign language. Never thought I'd have cause to say that to anyone. Say it now, she urged. Let me hear it once. He rolled them so he could see her face in the moonlight, his expression raw with emotion. I love you. Clara Whitmore, I love your courage and your kindness and the way you see past surfaces to what's real. I love your temper when you're riled and your laugh when you forget to be proper. I love, his voice broke. I love you more than I have words for in any language. Clara was crying now, silent tears that he kissed away with infinite gentleness. That's enough words, more than enough. They came together again, slower this time, savoring each sensation. The night was half gone, time slipping through their fingers like water, but here, now, they had eternity. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with her coat pulled over them both. Clara dozed fitfully. She dreamed of cages with golden bars, of contracts written in blood, of Roy's cold smile as he locked her away from the sun. She woke gasping to find Jace soothing her, his voice low and steady as the stream. Just a dream, he murmured. You're safe. You're here. For now. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. In a few hours? We have now. He tilted her chin up. That's more than some people get in a lifetime. It's not enough. No, he agreed. But it's ours. The eastern sky was beginning to pale, stars fading one by one. Clara felt panic rise in her throat. Not yet. She wanted to scream. Not yet. I should go, she said instead, the words ash in her mouth. I know. Neither of them moved. The horses stamped and whickered, ready for home. The stream sang its endless song, and still they held each other, trying to press a lifetime into minutes. There's something I want you to have. Jace reached for his saddlebags, pulling out something wrapped in soft leather. It was my mother's. Clara unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small silver comb decorated with turquoise. The craftsmanship was exquisite, a blend of traditions that spoke of Jace's dual heritage. I can't, please. He closed her fingers around it. Something real to hold on to when everything else is false. She was crying again, clutching the comb like a talisman. I have nothing to give you in return. You gave me everything. He kissed her forehead, her eyes, her lips. You gave me yourself. That's worth more than all the silver in these hills. The sky was definitely lightening now, pink and gold creeping across the horizon. They rose reluctantly, dressing in silence, each movement a step toward separation. Clara's hands shook as she pinned up her hair, tucking the comb carefully where it wouldn't show. I'll leave a week after the wedding, Jace said as he saddled the horses. Head north, maybe Canada, somewhere Roy Lanton's reach doesn't extend. Don't tell me where. Clara's voice was fierce. If I know, I'll follow, and that would destroy us both. He nodded, understanding too well. They mounted their horses, turned toward town and duty and the life that waited to swallow her whole. At the place where the trail forked, one path to the ranch, one to town, they stopped. This is where I leave you, Jace said. Safer if you ride in alone. Safe. The word was bitter on her tongue. I'll never be safe again. Not really. Part of me will always be out here, under these stars, with you. And part of me will always be waiting for a woman who can never come back. He reached across the space between their horses, catching her hand one last time. Be happy, Clara. As happy as you can be. Promise me that. I promise to try. And if he hurts you, truly hurts you, he won't. She squeezed his fingers. I won't let him. I'm stronger now. You made me stronger. You were always strong. I just helped you see it. The sun broke the horizon, flooding the world with golden light. Time was up. Goodbye, my love, Clara whispered. Goodbye, my heart, Jace replied. She turned her horse toward town, toward duty, toward a life that would never again taste of freedom. Behind her, she could feel Jace watching, but she didn't look back. She'd promised herself that much, no looking back. The ride to town passed in a blur. Clara felt split in two, her body moving mechanically through the motions while her soul remained in a cottonwood grove, wrapped in the arms of a man she could never have. At her lodgings, she bathed and dressed carefully, transforming back into the Eastern lady. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger, a woman with secrets in her eyes and invisible brands on her skin where love had marked her. Her landlady knocked. "Mr. Lanton's carriage is here. Miss." Clara touched the hidden comb in her hair, drawing strength from its cool presence. Then she walked downstairs to meet her fate, carrying within her the memory of a night when she'd touched the stars and found them warm. The contract was signed, the cage door closed, but somewhere in the vast wilderness, a man carried her heart into exile, and she carried his. It would have to be enough to sustain them through all the cold years ahead. In the carriage, Roy studied her with satisfaction, seeing only what he expected, a properly subdued bride ready for molding. He never noticed the way her fingers traced patterns on her skirt, writing love letters in the air to a man who would read them in dreams. The stars would remember what the world must never know. The morning after Clara's return, Roy's demeanor had shifted from satisfaction to something colder, more calculating. He sat across from her at breakfast, his pale eyes never leaving her face as she mechanically consumed toast and tea. "You look tired, my dear," he observed, voice silk over steel. "I trust your evening reflection proved illuminating?" "Yes." Clara kept her tone neutral. "I understand my duties clearly now." "Do you?" He leaned back, fingers steepled. "Because I've heard the most curious thing. It seems a woman matching your description was seen riding alone last night, heading toward the Morrison Ranch." Clara's heart hammered, but she'd learned to school her features in her mother's drawing rooms. "How odd. I retired early with a headache." "Of course you did." Roy's smile was razor thin. "Still, to avoid any misunderstandings, I've taken the liberty of arranging constant companionship for you. Mrs. Harwick will be your chaperone until the wedding." As if on cue, a severe woman in black bombazine entered. Her face could have been carved from granite, all sharp angles and disapproval. "Mrs. Harwick has excellent references," Roy continued. "She understands the importance of a bride's spotless reputation." Clara recognized a jailer when she saw one, but merely nodded. "How thoughtful. I've also moved the wedding forward, this Saturday. No point in prolonging the engagement. Is there 3 days?" Clara's fingers found her teacup to hide their trembling. "Rather sudden, isn't it? Efficiency is a virtue, my dear. Besides," his eyes glittered with something that might have been suspicion or cruelty, "I'm eager to claim what's mine." After breakfast, Clara found herself effectively imprisoned. Mrs. Harwick shadowed her every movement, from the seamstress to the church to her own lodgings. The woman spoke little but watched everything with sharp magpie eyes. Meanwhile, Roy set his other plans in motion. His man Jenkins, useful for certain unsavory tasks, received clear instructions. The half-breed at Morrison's ranch, find out everything about him, where he goes, who he talks to, what he does with his wages. Roy lit a cigar, smoke wreathing his cold smile. "A man like that, working so close to my fiancée, it pays to be thorough." Jenkins, understanding perfectly, touched his hat. "And if he proves problematic, then we address the problem, permanently if necessary." That evening, Clara stood for her final dress fitting, Mrs. Harwick watching from the corner like a crow. The seamstress chattered about the wedding, the dress, the weather, anything to fill the oppressive silence. "Such beautiful hair, miss," the woman said, reaching for Clara's pins. "Shall I?" "No!" Clara's hand flew to protect the hidden comb. That is, I prefer to manage it myself. Mrs. Harwick's eyes sharpened. Particular about our toilette. Are we? A lady's prerogative, Clara said coolly, but inside she trembled. The comb was all she had left of Jace, of freedom, of love. She would guard it with her life. Across town, Jace worked late in the Morrison barn, trying to exhaust himself into dreamless sleep. Every muscle ached from driving himself beyond endurance, but nothing could erase the memory of Clara in his arms, the taste of her tears as they said goodbye. You're going to work yourself to death, Sarah Morrison observed from the doorway. Maybe that's the idea. Sarah's expression softened. She's getting married Saturday. Whole town's talking about it. Jace's hand stilled on the harness he was mending. I know. You planning to be gone by then? Soon as I finish the work, I owe you. Jace. Sarah moved closer. What happened between you two? Nothing happened. The words came out harsh. Nothing that matters now. Before Sarah could respond, horses thundered into the yard. 6 men, rough-looking even by frontier standards, dismounted with practiced ease. Their leader, Jenkins, smiled without warmth. Evening, folks. Looking for the breed works here. Jace stepped forward, instantly wary. That'd be me. Mister, Lanton wants a word about your proximity to his fiancée. I've got nothing to say to Lanton. Wasn't really a request. Jenkins's hand moved to his gun. Boys here insist on it. Sarah started forward. Now see here. It's all right, Jace said quietly. He knew this dance, had survived it before. Let's get this done. They rode him out beyond town limits, to a dry wash where sound wouldn't carry. Jace knew what was coming before they pulled him from his horse, before the first fist connected with his ribs. Mister, Lanton don't like his property being handled by dirty hands, Jenkins said conversationally as his men worked Jace over. Especially not breed hands. You understanding me? Jace tasted blood but stayed silent. Words would only make it worse. See, we did some checking. Your mama was one of them Apache whores, wasn't she? Spread her legs for any soldier with whiskey. Jenkins laughed at Jace's involuntary flinch. Bad blood tells. Boy, mister, Lanton wants to be sure you know your place. The beating was methodical, professional. They avoided his face. Marks would raise questions, but his body took the full measure of their violence. Ribs cracked, organs bruised, wounds designed to hurt without quite killing. Here's what's going to happen, Jenkins said as Jace lay gasping in the dirt. You're leaving town. Tonight. Don't pack. Don't say goodbye. Just get on that sorry horse and ride. Because if Mr. Lanton sees you again, if you so much as look at his wife wrong, we'll finish what we started. Only next time, we won't be so gentle. They left him there, broken and bleeding under the stars he'd shared with Clara just hours before. Every breath was agony, movement nearly impossible. But Jace had survived worse, slowly, painfully. He dragged himself to his horse. The ride back to the ranch was a nightmare of endurance. More than once, he nearly fell, only stubborn while keeping him in the saddle. By the time he reached the Morrison gate, dawn was breaking and his shirt was soaked with blood. It was Robert Morrison who found him, slumped over his horse's neck at the barn door. Jesus Christ, Sarah! Get water and bandages. They half carried him inside, Sarah's gentle hands revealing the extent of damage while Robert cursed steadily under his breath. Lanton's men? Robert asked. Jace managed a nod. That bastard. I'll get the sheriff. No. Jace caught Robert's arm with surprising strength. Sheriff's in Lanton's pocket. You know that. We can't just let them. Yes, you can. Jace struggled to sit up despite Sarah's protests. I'm leaving anyway. No point making trouble for good people. But his body had other ideas. The moment he tried to stand, darkness crowded his vision. Sarah caught him as he fell. You're not going anywhere, she said firmly. Not like this. Word traveled fast in a small town. By afternoon, whispers of the beating had reached Clara despite Mrs. Harwick's attempts to shield her from gossip. She sat at tea with Roy, mechanically discussing flower arrangements while her heart screamed. You seem distracted, my dear. Roy observed. Not having second thoughts, I hope? Of course not. She forced a smile. Simply overwhelmed by all the preparations. Ah, yes, it must be taxing. Still, I trust you understand the importance of propriety during this time. Some associations are best severed cleanly. His meaning was clear. Clara's hand trembled as she set down her teacup. I'm not sure I understand. Oh, I think you do. Roy leaned forward. That unfortunate incident last night with the Morrison ranch hand. Such violent men, these mixed bloods. Started a brawl in town. I heard had to be subdued. Is he? Clara caught herself. How unfortunate. Indeed, I've suggested to Morrison that he dismiss the man. We can't have such savage elements disrupting our community. Roy's smile widened at her carefully blank expression. Don't worry, my dear. Soon you'll be safely married, protected from all unsavory influences. That night, Clara lay rigid in her bed while Mrs. Harwick snored in the chair by the door. Her mind raced with images. Jace hurt, bleeding, perhaps dying, and she was trapped here like a bird in a gilt cage. Near dawn, exhaustion finally took her. She dreamed of the canyon, of Jace's voice telling her to be strong. When she woke, tears had traced paths down her cheeks. Crying before your wedding? Mrs. Harwick observed coldly. How unseemly. Clara said nothing. What was there to say? That her heart was breaking? That the man she loved might be dead while she prepared to marry his would-be killer? Friday passed in a blur of final preparations. Clara moved through them like a ghost, speaking when spoken to, smiling when required. Inside, she felt hollow as a reed. That evening, desperate for any word of Jace, she tried one small rebellion. I'd like to send a thank you note to Mrs. Morrison. She told Mrs. Harwick. For her hospitality during my riding lessons. Mr. Lanton said no correspondence. Surely a simple thank you. No correspondence. Mrs. Harwick's tone brooked no argument. You'll have chances for social niceties after you're married. But Clara knew better. After marriage, the cage would only grow smaller. At the Morrison Ranch. Jace fought fever and infection while Sarah tended him with grim determination. On Friday afternoon, he woke clear-headed for the first time since the beating. Tomorrow? He asked hoarsely. Sarah nodded, understanding. The wedding's at noon. Jace closed his eyes. Somewhere in town. Clara was preparing to bind herself to a monster, and he was too broken to stop it. The weight of his helplessness was worse than any physical pain. There's something I need you to do, he told Sarah. After it's done, give her this. He pulled a letter from beneath his pillow, written in painful increments when consciousness allowed. Jace, please, just let her know I kept my promise, that I'm gone, that she's safe from any scandal I might bring. His voice broke. Let her know she was loved truly, even if only for a night. Sarah took the letter, tears in her eyes. I'll see she gets it. As Friday night descended, 3 hearts in Mercy's Bend prepared for a wedding that would shatter them all. Clara, imprisoned in silk and expectations. Jace, broken in body but not in spirit. And Roy, triumphant in his possession, never guessing that victory could taste so much like ash. The stars wheeled overhead, remembering other nights, other promises, but stars, for all their beauty, couldn't intervene in human sorrow. They could only bear witness as love prepared to die on the altar of duty. Tomorrow would come, harsh and inevitable as the desert sun. Tonight was for grieving what could never be. Saturday dawned crystal clear, the kind of morning that mocked human sorrow with its beauty. Clara stood before the mirror in her wedding dress, the white silk hanging on her like a shroud. Mrs. Harwick fussed with the veil while the seamstress made final adjustments. But Clara felt disconnected from her own body, as if watching someone else prepare for execution. Such a lovely bride, the seamstress chirped nervously. Mr. Lanton is a fortunate man. Indeed, Mrs. Harwick agreed, though perhaps a bit more powder under the eyes. The bride looks rather wan. No amount of powder could hide what the mirror revealed. A woman hollowed out by grief, going through motions without life behind them. Clara touched the hidden comb in her hair, drawing what strength she could from its presence. The church bells began to toll, summoning the town to witness her binding. Clara allowed herself to be led to the carriage, past the gathered crowd of townspeople who'd come to see the Eastern lady wed their most powerful citizen. She recognized some faces from her time at the Morrison Ranch. Did they know what Roy had done to Jace? Did they care? Inside the church, Roy waited at the altar, resplendent in a black suit that made him look like an undertaker. His smile when he saw her was possessive, triumphant. Clara's steps faltered. "Steady, Mrs." Harwick hissed, her grip on Clara's arm tightening. The walk down the aisle stretched endlessly. Clara felt the weight of eyes upon her, heard the whispers behind gloved hands. Roy's associates filled the front pews, bankers, merchants, men who'd prospered by aligning with his power. Her own side was nearly empty, just a few curious townspeople drawn by spectacle. The minister began the ceremony, his voice droning through familiar words that felt like blasphemy. Love, honor, cherish, lies, all lies. Clara stood frozen, her bouquet trembling in her hands. If any man has just cause why these two should not be joined. The pause stretched. Clara's heart leaped with wild hope. Would Jace come? Would someone, anyone, save her from this? Silence. The minister continued. Roy's hand found hers, possessive and cold. The vows approached like an avalanche, inevitable and crushing. And then, "I object." The voice came from the back of the church, clear and strong. Clara spun, her veil whipping around her, hope surging. But it wasn't Jace. Sarah Morrison stood in the doorway, her ranch clothes a stark contrast to the formal gathering. Her weathered face was set with determination. "On what grounds?" the minister spluttered. "On the grounds that this man," Sarah pointed at Roy, "ordered the brutal beating of an innocent man to clear his path to this marriage, on the grounds that he threatens and coerces to get his way, on the grounds of basic human decency." The church erupted. Roy's face went white, then red with fury. "How dare you?" "I dare because someone must." Sarah walked down the aisle, her boots echoing on wooden floors. "Jace Colburn lies near death because of you. 6 of your men ambushed him, beat him senseless, left him to die, all because you couldn't bear the thought of your bride learning to ride from someone you consider beneath you. These are baseless accusations. Are they?" Sarah pulled out a piece of paper. "I have here a witness statement from my husband, who found Jace, another from the doctor who treated him. And this," she produced another document, "a letter from one of your own men, Jenkins, bragging about the job in Murdoch's saloon. Seems whiskey loosens tongues." Clara swayed, saved from falling only by her grip on the altar rail. Is Jace alive?" Sarah said gently. "Barely, but alive." "This is preposterous," Roy snarled. "Even if these allegations were true, which they're not, it has nothing to do with this wedding. Clara, tell them..." "Tell them what?" Clara found her voice at last. "That you're a good man, that you deserve my hand, that I'm here willingly. You signed a contract, under duress, under threat to my family." Clara pulled off her veil, letting it fall. "I've been your prisoner, not your fiancé, Mrs. Harwick is my jailer, not my companion. And now I learn you nearly killed a good man simply for existing in your world. You little..." Roy lunged for her, but Robert Morrison and several other ranchers stepped between them. "I think that's enough," Robert said quietly. "Miss Whitmore, what do you want to do?" Clara looked around the church, at Roy's fury, at the shocked faces of the townspeople, at Sarah's encouraging nod. Then she reached up and pulled the engagement ring from her finger. "I want to leave." She threw the ring at Roy's feet. "The wedding is off, the engagement is terminated, and if you come near me again, I'll have you brought up on charges for assault and attempted murder." "You can't." Roy's composure shattered completely. "Your family's debts, I'll ruin them. I'll see your sisters on the streets." Clara felt something break free inside her chest, wild and fierce. "Then I'll work, I'll teach, I'll sew, I'll scrub floors if I have to. But I will not sell my soul to a monster who beats men for the crime of their birth." She turned to Sarah. "Take me to him, please." "You walk out of this church, you're finished," Roy screamed. "No decent man will have you. You'll be nothing, nobody." Clara paused at the door, looking back at the man who'd nearly owned her. "I'd rather be nobody than be yours." She walked out into the sunlight, Sarah's arm supporting her. Behind them, the church exploded into chaos. Roy's threats, the minister's protests, the crowd's gossip. None of it mattered now. "Can you ride in that dress?" Sarah asked. "I can do anything in this dress." Clara laughed, wild and free. "I just broke my chains in it." They rode hard for the ranch. Clara's wedding dress hiked up scandalously, her careful coiffure coming undone in the wind. She felt reborn, remade, as if the woman who'd walked into that church had died and something fiercer had taken her place. At the ranch, Sarah led her to the small room where Jace lay. Clara's newfound strength nearly failed at the sight of him, bruises mottling his skin, bandages wrapped around his ribs, his breathing shallow and labored. "Oh, my love," she whispered, sinking to her knees beside the bed. His eyes fluttered open at her voice, focusing slowly. "Clara?" His voice was barely a rasp. "Your wedding." "There was no wedding." She took his hand gently, careful of his injuries. "There will never be a wedding. Not to him. Your family will survive. We're survivors, remember? You taught me that." Tears ran freely down her face. "Why didn't you leave? You promised you'd leave." "Couldn't." He managed a ghost of a smile. "Turns out I'm not strong enough to ride away from you after all." "Good," she said fiercely. "Because I'm not letting you go. Not now, not ever." "Clara, no arguments. You're stuck with me. Jace Colburn, a disgraced woman with no prospects and a ruined reputation." She tried to smile through her tears. "Hope you don't mind damaged goods." "Never damaged." His fingers tightened on hers. "Just tested, like fire tests gold." Over the next hours, Clara refused to leave his side. She helped Sarah change his bandages, held water to his lips, talked to him when fever took him wandering. Her wedding dress grew stained with blood and medicine, but she didn't care. Let it be ruined. It had served its purpose, not to bind her to Roy, but to free her from him. As night fell, Robert returned from town with news. "Roy's in a rage, says he'll sue for breach of contract, ruin your family, run you out of the territory. Let him try." Clara said, "I have Sarah's witnesses, and I'll wager if we dig deeper, we'll find other victims of his tactics. Men like Roy always leave a trail of destruction." "You're probably right, but it won't be easy. He has powerful friends." "Then I'll need powerful friends of my own." Clara looked at the Morrisons. "Will you help me? You even have to ask?" Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "You're family now. Girl, we take care of our own." That night, as Clara kept vigil beside Jace's bed, she penned 2 letters. The first to her mother, explaining her choice and promising to find another way to support the family. The second to a lawyer in Denver she'd heard Roy mention, a man who specialized in cases against corrupt businessmen. Dawn found her still there, holding Jace's hand as his fever finally broke. His eyes, when they opened, were clear for the first time in days. "You're still here," he said wonderingly. "Where else would I be?" "Not here, not with me. I deserve love." Clara interrupted. "I deserve truth. I deserve a man who sees me as a person, not a possession. All things you give me freely. I have nothing else to give. No money, no position, no prospects. You have yourself. That's all I've ever wanted." He studied her face, the exhaustion, the tear tracks, the fierce determination. "What happens now? Now you heal. We fight Roy if we have to. And then—" Clara smiled, seeing a future that yesterday had seemed impossible. "Then we build a life, together, If you'll have me. If I'll have you. Jace laughed, then winced as it pulled his ribs. Clara Whitmore, I'd have you in rags or riches, in sickness or health. Careful, she teased. Those sound dangerously like vows. Maybe someday they will be, when I can stand before you as a free man, not a broken one. You're not broken, just bent, and I happen to like the shape of you just fine. Outside, the sun rose on a new day. There would be struggles ahead, Roy's revenge, family disappointment, the harsh judgment of society. But sitting there in a blood-stained wedding dress, holding the hand of the man she loved, Clara felt wealthier than she'd ever been in silk and jewels. She'd chosen love over security, truth over pretense, freedom over a golden cage. And though the price would be high, she'd pay it gladly. Some things were worth any cost. Jace squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The girl who'd arrived in Mercy's Bend seeking salvation in a business arrangement had found it instead in the steady hands and honest heart of a man the world called worthless. The world, Clara decided, was wrong about a great many things. The abandoned prospector's cabin nestled against the mountain face like a forgotten prayer. 2 months had passed since Clara walked out of the church. 2 months of running and hiding and learning to survive in ways her Eastern education had never imagined. Snow dusted the peaks above them, winter's first warning that their refuge would soon be tested by more than human threats. Clara knelt by the fireplace, coaxing flames from damp wood while Jace secured the door against the rising wind. His movements were still careful. The beating had left scars deeper than skin, but he was healing. They both were. Storm coming, he said, reading the signs in the restless air. Could be trapped here for days. Good. Clara brushed soot from her hands, no longer caring about stained fingernails or work-roughened palms. Let it snow us in until spring. Roy's men can't track what the mountain berries. They'd fled Mercy's Bend under cover of darkness, warned by Robert Morrison that Roy had hired bounty hunters. Dead or alive, the warrant read. Claiming Jace had kidnapped Clara, violated her, turned her against her lawful betrothed. The lies would have been laughable if they weren't so dangerous. You're thinking about him again. Jace moved behind her, hands settling on her shoulders. How can I not? Every shadow could be his men, every rider on the trail. She leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. I never meant for you to become a fugitive. I was already a fugitive the day I was born. Wrong blood, wrong color, wrong everything according to men like Lanton. His arms encircled her. Only difference now is I'm running toward something instead of away. Clara turned in his embrace, studying the face she'd memorized in lamplight and starlight and the gray between. And what are you running toward? Jace Colburn. You, he said simply. Always you. Their lips met with the desperate tenderness that marked all their stolen moments. Joy shadowed by uncertainty. Passion edged with the knowledge that tomorrow was never guaranteed. When they broke apart, Clara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I have something to tell you. She took his hand, placing it on her still flat stomach. Something that changes everything. Jace went very still. Clara, I'm carrying our child. The words hung in the air like snowflakes, delicate and transformative. I've suspected for weeks, but now I'm certain. His face cycled through emotions. Wonder, joy, terror, back to wonder. A child, our child. Are you angry? We have nothing. We're hunted. We can barely feed ourselves. He silenced her with a kiss so gentle it broke her heart. Angry? Clara, you've given me the world, a family, a future, things I never dared dream of. A complicated future, she reminded him. Bastard child of a ruined woman and a half-breed outlaw. What kind of life is that? An honest one. His hand spread protectively over her stomach. Loved by both parents. Raised in truth. That's more than either of us had. Clara thought of her own childhood. Her father's gentle lies. Her mother's bitter proprieties. The slow suffocation of genteel poverty. Then she thought of Jace's stories. Caught between two worlds. Welcome in neither. fighting for every scrap of dignity. "We'll do better," she said fiercely. "Our child will know they're wanted, always." That night, as snow began to fall in earnest, they made plans by firelight. Come spring, they'd head north to Canada as Jace had originally intended. Find work, build a home, create new identities if necessary. It wouldn't be easy, but what in their lives had been? "I want to marry you," Jace said suddenly. "Properly, before the child comes." "Jace, I know we can't. Not with the warrant, but someday, when it's safe." He pulled something from his pocket, a ring carved from dark wood, polished smooth. "I made this while you were sleeping. It's not much. It's perfect." Clara held out her hand, watching him slide it onto her finger. "When did you become a romantic?" "The night a too fine Eastern lady looked at me and saw a man worth knowing." He kissed her ring finger. "I've been composing bad poetry in my head ever since. I demand to hear this poetry immediately." "Never. A man has to keep some mystery." They laughed, the sound warming the small cabin more than any fire. Outside, the storm built into a proper blizzard, sealing them into their private world. For these precious days, there was no Roy, no warrant, no fear, just the two of them and the promise growing beneath Clara's heart. But even the deepest snow melts eventually. They'd been in the cabin 3 weeks when Clara woke to the sound of horses. Jace was already at the window, rifle in hand, his body tense as wire. "How many?" she whispered. 4, maybe 5. He checked his ammunition. "Take the back trail to the cave we found. Wait there. I'm not leaving you." "Clara, would you leave me?" She was already loading the pistol he'd taught her to shoot, hands steady despite her racing heart. His answer was to hand her extra ammunition. "Stay low. Only shoot if you have a clear target." The riders came into view, rough men on tired horses, badges glinting in the weak winter sun. Bounty hunters. Then, not Roy's private army. Somehow that was worse. These men hunted for money, not ideology. They'd be harder to discourage. "Jace Colburn." The leader's voice carried clearly through the cold air. "We know you're in there. Come out peaceable and we'll see the woman gets back safe to her family." Interesting definition of safe. Clara muttered, "You've got 1 minute before we come in shooting." Jace looked at Clara, a lifetime of words in that glance. Then he called out, "Let her walk out first. She's done nothing wrong." "She's harboring a fugitive. That's crime enough." Clara moved before Jace could stop her, stepping into view at the window. "Then arrest me too. I'm here of my own free will." Gunfire erupted. Clara dropped as windows shattered, wood splintering around them. Jace pulled her behind the overturned table they'd reinforced for just this possibility. "Damn it, Clara! They were going to shoot anyway." She checked her pistol. "At least now we know where they are." The siege was brief but vicious. Jace's rifle spoke with deadly precision, Clara covering his reloads. She tried not to think about the men falling in the snow, focused only on protecting what mattered. Jace, their child, their fragile chance at happiness. When the shooting stopped, 2 bounty hunters lay still. 2 more rode hard toward the tree line, and their leader clutched a bleeding shoulder. "This isn't over," he screamed. "Roy Lanton's doubling the bounty. Every gun in the territory will be looking for you." They watched until the riders disappeared, then quickly packed what they could carry. The cabin was compromised now. They had to move. "Where?" Clara asked as they saddled the horses. "Higher ground. I know a place." Jace's face was grim. "But Clara, this changes things. We can't run forever, not with you." "Pregnant?" She swung into the saddle with practiced ease. "Women have been having babies on the trail since time began. I'm no delicate flower. Jace, I thought you knew that by now. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met, but strength has limits. If something happened to you, to the baby, then we'd better make sure nothing happens." She reached across the space between horses, gripping his hand. "Together, remember? That was the promise." They climbed through the day and into the night, following paths visible only to Jace's experienced eye. Clara fought exhaustion and nausea. Morning sickness chose the worst times to strike, but didn't complain. Behind them, smoke rose from their abandoned cabin. The bounty hunters had returned with reinforcements. The new refuge was more cave than cabin, a natural shelter expanded by some long-ago hermit. It was cold, dark, primitive. It was perfect. Home sweet home, Clara said wryly as they unpacked. At least until spring? I'm sorry, Jace said quietly. This isn't the life I wanted for you. No? Clara built their fire with efficient movements. Because I remember a man who taught me to read weather and track deer and find water in dry land, almost like he was preparing me for something. That was before nothing. She turned to face him. I chose this. Jace chose you. And I'd choose it again, even knowing the cost. Even this? He gestured at the cave, the meager supplies, the uncertain future. Especially this. Clara moved into his arms. Do you know what I'd be doing right now if I'd married Roy? Sitting in that gaudy parlor, dressed like a doll, dying inside while he displayed me to his business partners. This, she gestured around them. This is life. Hard. Yes, dangerous, absolutely, but real. Most women wouldn't see it that way. Good thing you didn't fall in love with most women. That night, as wind howled outside their shelter, Clara felt the baby move for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings, so faint she might have imagined it. She gasped, grabbing Jace's hand and pressing it to her stomach. Did you feel that? He waited, patient as always. Then his face lit with wonder. There, was that our child, saying hello? They sat in amazed silence, hands linked over the promise of new life. Outside, winter raged and hunters searched and the world seemed bent on destroying them. But inside, in this moment, they had everything. I've been thinking about names, Clara said eventually. Oh? If it's a boy, Samuel, after my father, he would have liked you. I think dreamers recognize each other. She smiled at the memory. And if it's a girl? Anna, Jace said softly. After my mother, she was the strongest person I knew. Until you. Anna Whitmore Colburn. Clara tested the sound. I like it. You're giving our child your name too. Our child will carry both our names, both our strengths. She touched his face. That's how we build a better world. Jace, one child at a time, raised in love instead of hatred. He caught her hand, pressing it to his lips. When did you become so wise? Somewhere between learning to shoot and learning to run. Her smile turned rueful. Roy Lanton created his own worst enemy. He wanted to cage a songbird and ended up freeing a hawk. My hawk, Jace murmured, pulling her close. My fierce, beautiful hawk. They made love then, careful of her changing body, desperate to affirm life in the face of so much threat. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the wind and planning for a spring that seemed both forever away and terrifyingly close. We'll make it, Clara said. As much prayer as promise. All three of us. We'll make it to Canada. Build that life we dreamed of. We will, Jace agreed. Because we have to. Because that baby deserves better than this cave and running. This cave is temporary. Running is temporary. Clara placed their joined hands over her stomach. But this, our family, this is forever. Outside, snow continued to fall, burying their tracks, hiding them from those who wished them harm. It wouldn't last. Roy's reach was long, his hatred longer. But for tonight, they were safe. 3 hearts beating in the darkness, defying a world that said their love was wrong. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, they had each other. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Spring came to Mercy's Bend with unusual violence that year, bringing floods that washed out roads and lightning that set the prairie ablaze. Clara stood in the doorway of the Morrison Ranch, her infant daughter sleeping against her shoulder, watching the storm clouds gather like an army on the horizon. Another big one coming, Sarah Morrison observed, joining her. Good thing you came back when you did. It had been Jace's idea. This return to face their accusers. Running makes us look guilty. he'd said during those long winter months in hiding. Our child deserves better than parents who live as outlaws. Now he was in town with Robert Morrison and the lawyer who'd traveled from Denver, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Chase, who specialized in cases other attorneys wouldn't touch. Today was the day of reckoning. "Any word?" Clara asked, though she knew Sarah would have told her immediately. Not yet, but Margaret seemed confident. The evidence she gathered. Sarah shook her head. "Roy Lanton's going to have some explaining to do." Clara shifted Anna to her other shoulder. The baby's weight both burden and comfort. Born in a cave during a blizzard with only Jace's steady hands to guide her into the world. Anna had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She was perfect, and Clara would fight all the demons of hell to give her the life she deserved. In town, the courthouse was packed. Word had spread that Roy Lanton was facing charges: fraud, assault, attempted murder, and a dozen other crimes Margaret Chase had uncovered in her investigation. Half the town had suffered under his financial manipulations, but fear had kept them silent. Until now. Jace sat in the defendant's chair, looking uncomfortable in his borrowed suit but holding his head high. Across the aisle, Roy glared with undimmed hatred, his expensive lawyers flanking him like guard dogs. "The defense calls Mrs. Sarah Morrison," Margaret announced. Sarah took the stand, her testimony clear and damning. She spoke of the beating, of Roy's threats, of the systematic persecution of a man whose only crime was existing. She produced the letter from Jenkins, Roy's enforcer, who'd fled the territory rather than face justice. "The defense calls Robert Morrison." Robert corroborated his wife's testimony, adding details about Roy's business practices, the extortionate interest rates, the foreclosures on families who missed a single payment, the way he'd built his empire on others' misery. "The defense calls Clara Whitmore." Clara entered the courtroom like a force of nature, Anna in her arms. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The ruined Eastern lady, the woman who'd walked out of her own wedding, now standing proud with her illegitimate child for all to see. "State your name for the record," Margaret prompted. "Clara Whitmore." She met Roy's eyes steadily. Mother of Anna Colburn, partner to Jace Colburn, and witness to Roy Lanton's crimes. Her testimony was devastating. She spoke of the contract he'd forced her to sign, the imprisonment disguised as protection, his casual bigotry and calculated cruelty. She told of Mrs. Harwick, of the threats to her family, of Roy's admission that he'd ordered Jace beaten. "He wanted to own me," Clara said clearly. "Not marry me, own me. Like he tries to own everyone in this town." "Lies!" Roy erupted. "This whore spreads her legs for a half-breed and dares—" The judge's gavel cut him off. "Mr. Lanton, you'll control yourself or be removed from the courtroom." But the damage was done. Roy's mask had slipped, showing the ugliness beneath. The jury saw it. The town saw it. Most importantly, the traveling reporter from the Denver newspaper saw it, scribbling notes that would soon spread Roy's shame across the territory. The prosecution tried to salvage their case, painting Jace as a kidnapper, Clara as a victim of seduction. But Margaret Chase demolished their arguments with surgical precision. She produced witness after witness, ranch hands who'd seen Clara come to Jace willingly, townspeople who'd suffered under Roy's rule, even a former employee who testified about the safe full of falsified documents in Roy's office. The defense calls Dr. Marcus Webb. The elderly doctor who'd treated Jace after the beating took the stand. His testimony was clinical, detached, and therefore all the more horrifying. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, wounds consistent with a prolonged assault by multiple attackers. "In your medical opinion," Margaret asked, "what would have happened if Mr. Colburn hadn't received treatment?" "He would have died." "Doctor," Webb said simply. "No question about it." The final witness was unexpected. Margaret called Roy's own mother, a frail woman who'd traveled from San Francisco. Her testimony was quiet but damning. A lifetime of watching her son grow from a cruel child to a crueler man, of staying silent out of fear and misplaced loyalty. "I should have spoken sooner," she said, tears on her wrinkled cheeks. "Should have stopped him years ago." That poor girl, that young man, they deserve justice. When closing arguments concluded, the jury retired. Clara waited outside with Anna, Jace beside her, their hands linked. Whatever happened, they'd faced it together. The verdict came back in less than an hour. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of assault, guilty. On the charge of attempted murder, guilty. The list went on. Roy's face grew paler with each pronouncement. When the judge sentenced him to 20 years in territorial prison, he finally broke. "You'll pay for this!" he screamed as guards dragged him away. "All of you, I'll—" The door slammed, cutting off his threats. The courtroom sat in stunned silence, then erupted in celebration. Roy Lanton's reign of terror was over. Outside, in the spring sunshine, Clara felt she could breathe for the first time in over a year. Anna gurgled happily, reaching for her father's face. "It's over," Jace said wonderingly. "Really over?" "No," Clara corrected. "It's beginning, our real life, the one we choose." Margaret Chase approached them, smiling. "The judge wants to see you both, about making things official." An hour later, they stood in the judge's chambers, Anna as their witness, exchanging vows that meant more than any cathedral ceremony. Clara wore her travel-stained dress, Jace his borrowed suit, but she'd never felt more beautiful. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado," the judge intoned, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss tasted of tears and joy and freedom. That evening, the Morrison Ranch hosted a celebration. The whole town seemed to turn out, people who'd hidden their sympathy now eager to show support. There was music and dancing, and more food than Clara had seen since leaving the East. "Speech!" someone called. "Let's hear from the bride and groom." Jace looked panicked, but Clara squeezed his hand and stood. The crowd quieted. "A year ago," she began, "I came to Mercy's Bend as a stranger. Planning to trade my freedom for security, I thought I knew what I needed. Money, position, safety." She looked at Jace, at Anna, at the faces of people who'd become family. "I was wrong. What I needed was truth. What I needed was love. What I needed was the courage to choose my own path." She raised her glass of cider. "To second chances, to justice, and to the knowledge that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances." The crowd cheered, and Clara sat down to Jace's wondering look. "When did you learn to make speeches?" "Somewhere between fighting bounty hunters and giving birth in a blizzard." She leaned against him, Anna peaceful between them. "We've all learned things we never expected." As the party continued around them, Jace produced a wrapped package. "Wedding present," he said shyly. Clara opened it to find a leather-bound journal and a set of pens. "Jace, you should write it down," he said. "Our story, so Anna knows where she came from, so other women in impossible situations know there's hope." Clara touched the smooth leather, imagining the pages filled with their truth. "Will you help me? Your story is part of it." "Partners," he agreed, "in all things." Later, as they walked back to their own small cabin on the Morrison property, a wedding gift from Robert and Sarah, Clara paused to look at the stars, the same stars that had witnessed their first night together, their flight, their fears, and now their triumph. "No regrets?" Jace asked, following her gaze. "How could I regret the path that led me to you, to Anna, to this?" She gestured at their simple home, their sleeping child, their hard-won peace. "I was meant to be here, Jace, with you, building this life, even though it's not the life you were raised for, especially because it's not that life." Clara turned to face him. "That life was a cage. This one has sky and stars and room to breathe, room to love, room to be." They went inside, Anna stirring briefly before settling back to sleep. Outside their window, the lanterns from the celebration still glowed, voices carrying on the night wind. Tomorrow there would be work, the ranch, the baby, the slow building of their place in this community that had learned to see beyond surface divisions. But tonight, they were complete. A family forged in adversity, tested by fire, and strong enough to face whatever came next. "I love you," Clara whispered in the darkness. "Thank you for saving me. You saved yourself." Jace replied, "I just held the rope while you climbed. Then thank you for holding the rope, and for catching me when I jumped. Always," he promised. Always. In her cradle, Anna sighed contentedly, surrounded by love that had defied convention, prejudice, and violence to create this moment of perfect peace. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, witnesses to a love story that had begun with a contract and ended with a choice. The choice to live free, love true, and build a future on their own terms. It was more than enough. It was everything. Thank you all for listening to this story from the Wild West. I hope Clara and Jace's journey touched your hearts as much as it touched mine. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you by a cozy fireplace, on your commute, or perhaps under the stars like our lovers? Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire and share your thoughts about their story in the comments below. Until next time, partners.